I think that a lot of Democrats are going to be breathing sighs of relief and are going to be feeling very differently about the campaign now from what they were this time 2 weeks ago. The strength of that performance from Obama actually highlights how poor he was a couple of weeks ago. And this actually shows, under the right circumstances, he's a very good debater. He was making substantively a lot of the same points that he was actually making in the first debate, but he was just making them with a lot more authority and in a way that connected to the audience a lot better, and I think this was to do with the format. He showed that he's a much better people politician than Romney is, but I thought that was a clear win for Obama today.
I would agree with that. It was striking how much better Obama was today, and I also thought Romney wasn't terrible, but he was a fair bit worse than last time. Sort of from the first few minutes where he was on the defensive talking about the auto bailout, that was something you didn't see at all in the first debate. It was always Romney driving the discussion. I think as it went on, Romney got a little bit stronger, and Obama clearly had prepped very hard and had a lot of great talking points throughout the first kind of half or so, and then it kind of opened up more a little bit, and it felt more like a draw. But in the first part, where people are most tuned in, I thought Obama was succinct, on message, and hitting his points well. One final little point, which I think is noteworthy, is you saw from the beginning there was a question from a college student in New York about getting a job. They immediately turned that discussion to manufacturing jobs, and there's a reason for that. Ohio right now is the most important swing state, and other states in the Midwest. They're emphasizing manufacturing to such a great degree, even though it's not probably the future of the U.S. economy or the biggest issue right now, but they're speaking directly to the states where the manufacturing is so important and where the election will be decided.
Yeah, we have to remember, in the 1950s, 7 Midwestern states in the US produced a quarter of the world's manufactured goods. And just inevitable changes in the world economy are one of the reasons why that part of the country is struggling. Now, I think that we can all, to ourselves, acknowledge that it's kind of a pipe dream that the US will ever achieve that kind of manufacturing preeminence again. But I agree with Luke, this was a very specifically targeted message at Ohio and also Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Iowa. And I think the reason why Obama hasn't had the same slide in the polls in those states as he's had everywhere else is because those states actually have had a quicker economic recovery that's been manufacturing-led, and because Romney openly opposed the auto industry bailout, which, I mean, having lived in Michigan, I know that is something regarded very, very seriously in that part of the world. Just on another point with this debate, stylistically, I think that one of the things that this shows is aggression is a really difficult thing to get right in debates. Now, Obama definitely needed to be more aggressive than he was last time, and I think he was, and I think he controlled it very well, and there were moments where he seemed to be crescendoing to this finely honed outrage, like when he was saying it's offensive to think that we would try to score political points out of Libya. Romney was also aggressive, and though, I mean, the worm is not very scientific, but it's so compelling, he didn't seem to be getting traction from his aggression. When he went on the defensive, or when he started to attack, the worm dipped. So it seems that this time around, even though Romney was basically being pretty much the same, I thought, in terms of aggression, cutting in, trying to interrupt, maybe he took some inspiration from Joe Biden in the last debate also, who did all of those things. It didn't seem to help him this time around.
No, I would agree with that. And people have brought up the point that Romney tends to be a stickler for the rules in debates. That was one of the criticisms. He went after Perry at one point in the primary debates, which was considered a low point. And I always thought that criticism was kind of overblown, but it came out here again. He kept on saying to the moderator, he's talking over me, isn't this my turn? And I just didn't think, I think anger and like passion is important, but the kind of anger at the rules didn't seem like it really resonated, and I thought that was an especially weak point for Romney.
Also, the split screen didn't work for him this time. It kept showing his face and he looked like he just stepped in something. I think that this format where they're both allowed to roam around the room, you've got to remember, and you can tell just from our cardboard cutouts, both of these men have very physically imposing presences. This really worked very well for Obama this time, able to stalk around the room and talk to people, whereas everything about his body language last time around had suggested he'd been up for 48 hours playing Call of Duty. He really looked like he didn't want to be there last time. He actually looked like he wanted to be there this time. Sorry if I'm concentrating so much on the stylistic aspects, but let me reiterate. Substantively, it was almost exactly the same debate as they had the last time around. They were actually making very, very similar points as what they were making the last time around. But Obama just came off looking so much better this time.
Yeah, I do think Obama had some more concrete examples this time around. He wasn't sort of muddying the waters and in the weeds policy discussion as much. He had sort of points he wanted to hit, and I think he did a much better job of that. Do you think we should open up for questions now?
I believe that we should. Yes, sir.
One of the criticisms of Obama was last time that Romney changed his facts and policies during the debate, and Obama didn't really call him up on it. Do you think that changed in this debate?
Obama was quite a bit more aggressive about calling Romney out on what he considered falsehoods. And in fact, I mean, because last time Romney had been the one doing it, that line that he plagiarised from Daniel Patrick Moynihan, you're not entitled to your own facts. Yeah, Romney was the one being a lot more aggressive on that front last time. What did you think?
I think he followed Biden's model, which Biden did a good job of in the last debate, which was tying specifically back to the Republican Congress and the Ryan plan, the Republican budget plan championed by the vice presidential nominee, and sort of saying, you can put forward these arguments in the general election, but you can't entirely run away from your party's record over the last couple of years. And I think that was an effective way of doing it. And he almost did it none in the last debate, which I thought was a huge mistake.
There's a hand that back corner there.
What do you guys think about what President Obama and Governor Romney were talking about Libya, and that's the issue that the US ambassador they got killed, and what they knew, what the administration knew? What do you think?
It's a difficult question to fully sort out, especially now. I didn't like at the beginning, I thought liberals were saying don't politicize this issue, which sort of meant don't criticize anything, which was wrong. But I think conservatives now just run with it in a way that's almost unimaginable. Newt Gingrich said that this was worse than Watergate because no one died in Watergate. It's unfortunate that it's become such a campaign issue. The Obama administration has to take ownership for what happened. But, I mean, it was mostly low-level people who would be making these kind of decisions. Security at an embassy is not something that the president or the Secretary of State would ever actually directly hear about. So I think it's an important issue, but it's a little bit of a shame that that sort of specific aspect dominated the entire foreign policy question or discussion when it's, I feel like, a smaller issue and much broader problems.
Yeah, we'll see a lot more about foreign policy in the next debate. I thought Obama handled himself very well in this debate. Yesterday, Hillary Clinton actually came out and said, on this issue, the buck stops with me. She's basically falling on her sword. I'm taking responsibility for this. And what Obama actually said in the debate was, yes, she's the Secretary of State and it's her responsibility. He said, but she works for me. I'm the president and it's my responsibility. And so he actually did take some ownership for this, but in a way that made him look really good. And the worm loved that. Yeah. So I thought that, I think that this continues to show the Republicans have thought in the last few weeks that they'll be able to get traction out of foreign policy. I don't think they can. I think that Obama is going to remain the first Democrat since Franklin Delano Roosevelt to go into an election with an advantage on foreign policy. And I think he's going to keep that, and I think that's what that exchange shows.
I also think it's telling, I mean, obviously the questions are screened, so we don't know how many were put forward, but the independent voters this was a foreign policy and domestic policy discussion. Almost everyone asked questions on domestic policy, and that's what people care about in this election. Exactly. It's not a foreign policy election.
Can I just quickly slightly, when Obama was actually asked who was responsible, he actually batted the question away. He didn't actually answer it. Look at his actual words. It's later on he said what
Right.
During that question, he actually avoided the question totally. I noticed a technique they both use to give themselves time to think is to thank very much, John, for that question. It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
When, for example, they were both asked about what are you going to do about female wage inequality, what did they both do, especially Obama? He gives this waffly story about his mum and his grandmother, ignoring the question altogether. In fact, and he then referred to the lolly something or other thing.
Lily Ledbetter.
It's like a little bit, which is something he'd done. But he didn't actually answer the question, which is, what are you going to do about it? Didn't answer it.
Yeah, I mean, this is something basically universal to politicians. And I mean, you'll often see even here interviews where they get asked a question they don't want to answer, so they answer a different question. And depending on how aggressive the interviewer is, the interviewer may try to bring them back. Both of these guys are very skilled operators, and it's actually worth noting that in these debates so far, I would say neither of them has made a major gaffe. But I think that, yeah, both of them are very good at this, this kind of stalling technique, often flattering the questioner as a way of actually avoiding...
and getting their name right.
Yes, yeah, that's right. But I think so when Obama was probably first posed that question, I think he probably didn't know how to answer it, but then in about 5 minutes he worked out what he wanted to do, and that's when he was able to come back.
Question.
Yes.
The question about the AK-47 assault rifle, I thought Obama was quite weak on that. Did you think?
Well, that's an issue he's very weak on. I mean, it became very clear over the summer of mass shootings that this isn't going to prompt any kind of action on gun control. And Obama, politically, has nothing to gain from that because everyone who's in favour of gun control will vote for him anyway. And there are marginal, undecided voters who can still be scared into thinking that the Democrats want to take their guns away, which I think if there was one issue that actually pushed the 2000 election in favour of George W. Bush, aside from, you know, shenanigans in Florida, it was gun control. That was an issue that turned previously blue state red, like West Virginia. That is still red. So no, there was no way that Obama was going to come out with something strong on that.
Going back to Libya, because obviously I was following this entire debate on Twitter, and I think that one of the things that kind of people on both sides of the aisle took away is that Romney had a real opportunity to seize on the Libya question, that he kind of fumbled it. But there's going to be a debate on foreign policy next week. What do you guys think would have to be said by either of the candidates to really, as a response to really make Libya an issue that can continue to make a difference in the polls?
What do you think?
It's kind of a cop-out answer. Just back to what I said before, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, no. What I think is interesting is that on domestic policy, you oftentimes hear Romney and Obama sometimes sort of having very different viewpoints, but almost coming together a little more, and Romney saying, I don't like Obamacare, but I don't want to kick people off pre-existing conditions. On foreign policy, it's the exact opposite. They're actually quite similar on the substance of most of the issues. They both probably want to get out of Afghanistan by 2014. I don't think Romney would do anything drastically different on Iran or Syria, but there's the rhetoric they try and make different. Sort of, it's very, Romney especially has very aggressive talking points, but there isn't much substantively which they would do differently. It was very early on they decided they were going to portray Obama as weak on foreign policy. And for better or worse, that hasn't how he's been. It's been one of the big liberal critiques of him, that he's been too hawkish. But they've continued to sort of use that line of attack instead of sort of pivoting and saying, wait, did the surge in Afghanistan really work, or so-and-so. So once again, I just don't think a huge issue.
So you don't think there's an opportunity to really use Libya as a wedge?
I don't think there is, even though the Republicans thought there was. And the reason is, firstly, it's not actually a big substantive foreign policy issue. The Republicans aren't proposing really doing anything different on that. And in fact, when they're talking more aggressively on foreign policy, Biden had the right response last week, which is, well, what else are you going to do? War? Is that what you want? I mean, you know, if the Republicans get painted as the party of more war, they're in big trouble because people, you know, they've really been turned off that kind of belligerence by Iraq. But the other reason why I don't think they can get traction out of it is, okay, so start telling the story of what happened in Libya. Well, you know, a few hours after that, the embassy came out with a statement which turned out to be incorrect, and then the White House came out with a statement based on that information which was incorrect, and the State Department came. Within 5 seconds of telling that story, you have lost the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a very complicated situation involving multiple mistakes made by multiple government agencies, and it's not something that people are that interested in actually hearing. And I thought that when Romney came back to this, talking point, like down went the worm, even though they quite liked some of the other things that he'd been saying. So I actually don't think there's a big opportunity there for the Republicans. Yeah.
I thought it was really great that pay equality was brought up as an issue, considering in most Western nations, the fact that women are paid, like 75% or often less of for doing the same job is abysmal. So my question is, what's the policy record of both Obama and Romney in their respective roles in trying to reduce pay inequality?
There's not much of a. I don't think there's actually that much of a policy record for either of them. I mean, there was the Lilly-Ledbetter Act for Obama. I mean, the problem is, and this is a problem in every Western country, structural inequalities, that it's difficult for the government to actually take action to remedy it. I don't think it's impossible. I actually think that some Scandinavian countries have really led the way with things like compulsory paternity leave, for example. Compulsory paternity leave has turned out to be one of the greatest gap-closing measures available. You would never ever have that in the United States. Never. So a lot of the sort of policy instruments that could make a serious difference here are actually off the table. And so there's not much of a policy record for either of them. I mean, Romney basically said, well, I hired some women. And there wasn't much more than that he could say. And so Obama signed this act saying men and women have to be paid equally. It was absolutely outrageous that there was a situation before that. And so, that is a good legal remedy, but that isn't going to make much of a dent in that overall disparity, I don't think.
What do you think of Romney's answer to the difficult question, how do you differentiate yourself to George W. Bush?
I actually felt sorry for Romney at that point because, I mean, it's not like Obama could get asked a similar question. And, I mean, the way I've always seen it is Obama got elected by a landslide last time because of George W. Bush, and if he gets re-elected, it's going to be because of George W. Bush. It's because so many Americans still blame George W. Bush for the state of the economy, and it's because the Iraq War left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth. But it was really funny. Like, Romney didn't come out and say, look, we all know he was terrible, let's just acknowledge it. He was saying, Bush was a different man for a different time. I didn't think it was a particularly strong response. I thought Obama had a very nasty comeback in terms of saying, here are things that George W. Bush did better. What did you think, Lee?
Yeah, I thought it was all right. I thought it was one of Romney's actually better responses up to that point, although it was sort of bizarre. It was focusing a little bit on like oil and Latin America. I don't think that's what we remember George Bush for. I thought Obama's response was kind of a little bit weak actually too. I thought that was a chance to say, you're splitting hairs over the differences here. Like, let's talk about the things George Bush did that people actually care about. So I thought that's where Obama was going to go with his response, and I didn't really see it.
I noticed that both of them alluded to previous presidents.
Yeah, I mean...
And so Obama about Clinton, and of course Romney about who?
Reagan, yes. I noticed actually when they had the yellow line for women and the green line for men, I think the single moment when the yellow line got the highest was actually with a mention of Bill Clinton. Yeah, it's interesting. Watching the rehabilitation of Reagan in Republican discourse over the last 4 years has been fascinating. He is a forgetting device. He is the way they try to forget that George W. Bush ever happened. He is basically the only one that they can come back to. I mean, I think that Reagan would probably be the most popular recent ex-president, although Clinton is very popular as well. And so the Democrats have this advantage. They can actually keep wheeling Bill Clinton out. And, I mean, Obama couldn't take full advantage of that 4 years ago because Bill Clinton was not very happy with the way that he had run his primary. But oh yeah, watch for Obama to refer to Clinton a lot more. I think. There's a question up the back there.
How disingenuous do you think Romney's been in his discussion of things like manufacturing and labelling China as currency manipulator? I mean, it seems to me like it's very populist and he's almost distorting his grasp of economics, which seems to be better than that.
Well, there was just a study that came out today that called serious question into the 5-point plan, which is to create 12 million jobs. And I'm surprised there wasn't more direct fact-checking on this earlier. I'll see if I can remember the details here. But one of the big things he said was that his tax plan would create 7 million new jobs. But it turns out that that was over 10 years instead of 4 years, and that was assuming full employment, which we obviously don't have. Good luck getting China to respect intellectual property rights. It's not going to happen in the immediate future. And on energy, apparently the study he cited was one looking at current policies. So it would be what would happen if the status quo continued. It had nothing to do with new Romney policies. So yeah, Romney's been incredibly vague in this campaign. That's kind of what you do a lot of time. I think especially this time more than the past, but that is sort of what happens when you're running against an incumbent. You don't have to defend your record, and you can give these sort of vague platitudes and vague assertions. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but and I think you saw a good job today calling people out, asking for more specifics, but there's no doubt it's been very vague.
Is there one more question? No? Oh, yeah.
Do you reckon this will revive Obama's campaign?
Yeah, I mean, it will keep his donors happy. It will spur more volunteering. It does what he needs it to do. I have given up trying to predict what these debates will do to polls. What I suspect is last time Romney got a lot of his natural support back. And I don't see this debate moving the polls the same way, but then again, I didn't see the last debate moving the polls as much as it did. What do you think?
Yeah, there's always a danger in people who spend their entire day covering politics, trying to predict how people react, who don't really care about politics that much generally. I think Obama won this, certainly was stronger in this debate, and I agree with David that certainly enthusiasm will return amongst Democrats. Some of the changes in the polls you saw over the last week was returned Republican enthusiasm. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what will happen. I definitely think if it moves the polls, it will be towards Obama, but probably marginally. And despite what happened last week, presidential debates generally don't change a race very much.